All right, we'll get going here. I'd a lot of information to get through, so if we could do that, so we have time for questions, because I know everybody wants to know what the VA does with the information that you send us. So, I am Jennifer Lancer. I'm with the Department of Veterans Affairs. I am your education liaison representative for the state of Wisconsin. So, if you are an approved school, you have to work with me. Stop giggling over there. So, who in here has been actually certifying a student or students for 6 months or less? One. So you guys are two. So pretty seasoned SCOs. Okay, good. Because they put like the little bit more advanced training first, which is totally fine, but just I want to put that precursor on it. This is slightly more advanced training. Tomorrow we'll talk about some more basic requirements, some friendly reminders that sometimes we might overlook because we are seasoned SCOs. So today we're going to talk about some very specific situations, how you might certify, what we would want you to certify, and what implications that actually has on a student's payment. So it's great to know because your students are going to ask you, okay, well, if I drop this class, what's going to happen? So hopefully this will answer some of those questions if you don't already know, or maybe just give you a better outlook on what exactly the VA does with the data that you present to us. Because there are some misunderstandings about how we pay. So a couple of the first three scenarios are, like I said, a little bit more specific. So standard terms, if you certify the full term as standard, but they're really in mini terms, they're really in non-standard terms. Well, how do we fix that? And what do we do? What if we have a chronic dropper? What do we do then? I know everyone in this room has a chronic dropper, at least one. And then we'll get into some more basic situations, just to kind of talk about how it affects a student's payment when it actually happens. So first, let's talk about changing, certifying a standard term to a non-standard term. So there's a lot of words up here, but basically it comes down to the VA, in this scenario, you as a certifying official, say you certified the standard full term, that fall term there, okay, so 12 credits for $1,200. Well, you actually, get a notification or you look at the student schedule and you're like, oh, darn, that's not what happened at all. And you have to change it. You realize that only 6 of those credits are during that standard term, and then 3 credits are broken out into those 8-week classes. All right, well, what do we do with that? So these first couple scenarios, on the left side, you're going to see what you would do as an SCO. And on the right side, I'm going to relate those actions to what the VA is going to do. So first, the first thing we have to do is we have to correct what was certified. So you certified 12 credits, 12 credit hours, but really only 6 happened during that time period. Because we have to remember that only the credits that happened during that standard term may be certified together. Anything on a student schedule that falls outside of your standard term must be certified separately. So I know I'm kind of jumping because, like I said, this is more advanced training. So forgive me for just kind of getting right into it. So we're going to reduce those 12 credits that you initially certified down to 6. And you're going to adjust those tuition and fees appropriately to associate with those 6 credits. Well, VA's already paid $1,200 for 12 credits. So when you reduce that, we're going to take away $600 because we pay based on specific certifications. Yes, we understand in your record keeping it might look different, or at your school, you might think that, yeah, we have our money. Awesome. Well, that's not exactly how the VA is going to see it. So based on that reduction, the implication is that you're going to reduce the 6 credits and create a student overpayment for $600. And then you're also going to create a student overpayment for that books and supplies. And then if the student was actually paid housing for that term or for that month of August already, because we're going to catch this early, hopefully, we're going to take away a couple days of that housing payment because 6 credits is not that threshold of more than half time in this scenario. So we would not pay housing for those 2 days, the 20th and the 21st, because they don't become over that half time until 8/22. So next we fix that. So now they're in 6 for that standard term. And now we have to certify the other remaining credits. So you are going to create a new certification for the non-standard terms, 3 credits each for $300 tuition and fees for the dates, the exact dates that are on that student's schedule. So the VA will then turn around and pay you for those new certifications. $300, because the term already started in this scenario. So we're going to pay you $300 for that August term. And no sooner than 2 weeks before that October term will the VA come back and pay that the additional $300. So you have to then consider that student has a $600 overpayment on their VA account now. And you're going to get that $600 because the VA is going to pay for those 2 new certifications. So that student is going to need a refund. So because you now certified 2 additional terms, the VA is going to pay the school, like I said, $300 for each term. And then we're going to do the the books and supplies for those credit hours appropriately. And then we're going to establish 2 separate housing allowance periods. One for the 8/22 through 17, because that is when they're over that halftime rate. And then another for the 10/20 through 12/11. So yeah, that student was in full time for that full term, but we have to follow our own rules when it comes to paying, which our rules are the law. So this is how we have to pay based on what you certify. Something to consider when this is happening is that another part of VA rules is called due process. So when an overpayment is assigned to a student, they have due process, which is a 30-day period that the VA is not allowed to take those monies back from any subsequent payments. So yeah, you might have a conception that we reduce the tuition and fees, but we're going to pay it back, so why don't you just apply it to that student's debt? Well, it doesn't work like that. Because first of all, we're always going to pay the school unless you're over the maximum, and that's a whole thing. We're not going to get into that right at this moment. But it really comes down to due process. So that student is, even with the books and supplies overpayment, a $250 overpayment that we discussed because of that reduction from 12 to 6, we can't just take that money back when we pay those other 2 terms. We have to give them due process to allow them to repay that money. So we're actually going to issue those additional monies to that student unless due process has passed. So that's something to keep in mind. We're not just going to automatically offset payments. We have to establish the overpayments. So this is, again, this is assuming a student is Chapter 33 at the 100% benefit level. What about non-33? It's a similar situation. It's all based on rate of pursuit. So basically, for the time that student is in at least 9 credits, they're going to be getting paid that full time because of the equivalency credit hours, things of that nature. And for the time that in 33 world, they wouldn't be getting paid housing allowance, they would be getting paid half time. So it's the same type of scenario, calculating rate of pursuit and full time when they're overlapping, all that good stuff. Any questions on this scenario? I know, that's why I put it up here.
In the first 4, he was in 9 credits total. 9 credits total, but they were all, the first one was 4 weeks, and then 6 weeks, and then 8 weeks. And I did it as a multiple term. broke out the tuition and fees, and submitted it. The student called me up and said, I'm not getting my BAH for this first 4 weeks. And I said, well, that's because you weren't over 6 credits. So he called down to the VA, and the VA told the student to tell me to change it.
That happens. Unfortunately, that happens. You say that I'm following the rules, and this is how it's going to be certified. So, you have the power in that scenario. You can show them the SCO handbook and say, hey, here's the rules. This is what I'm doing because this is the requirement. You know, that SCO handbook, that's a public document. Anybody can go online and find that. So don't be afraid to show that to your students and say, this is the guidelines that I use. Anybody else on that?
I always have trouble remembering at what point does the institution have the obligation to return that $600 versus return it to the student?
Okay, so there's 7 scenarios. They're in the SCO handbook, and the Debt Management Center will actually talk about it tomorrow. Cut and dry, if it is a complete and total withdrawal on or before the first day of the term, your school is liable for that money. If it is a reduction, even if it is your error, in this case, this might have been your error, that's still a student overpayment. You can work with the student to return that money on their behalf, but you have to return that money with their own remittance slip. So you let your student know, hey, I screwed up your certification. You're going to get this overpayment. We want to send the money back on your behalf, but I need you to give me the document. You're absolutely, you can do that. Yes.
After the term started, and then I got a call from the business office saying, you know, when are we going to get a debt letter? Well, so I opened up a case when the VA asked a question, and they said that there was a one-time forgiveness. Have you heard of that? I never heard of that either. And so we have money that we want to return to the VA, but we don't.
Okay, so the student attended. So pretty much, if it turns out that you have more money because the VA paid you and the student withdrew or dropped, or there's some sort of reduction, you have to follow your policy for refunds. And basically, unless it's one of the 7 reasons to return it directly to the VA, you have to act as if that money came directly from the student's pocket. Yep, that's right. You reward him for dropping out, and we'll talk about that. That's actually in my scenario. So it happens. It's a loophole. Some students actually figure it out and get free money. You'd be surprised. So, all right, we're going to move on to the next scenario. So, what happens if you submit you submit the original certification, and then it hasn't been processed? Maybe it's fall and there's a backlog, and you submit an adjustment, and they're processed at the same time. So, in this scenario, you certify a full 16-week semester, 13 credits. The student reduces to 7. The VA hasn't paid for the original 13, and you get a random tuition and fee payment. Where did that payment come from? How did you possibly calculate that? So here you can see what was certified originally, how you adjusted the certification, and all kinds of questions that you have. Okay, so what do we do? Number 1, actions to take. We've already taken these actions in VA once, number 1 and number 2. So on number 1, what did the VA do with it? Well, we didn't do anything with it because we haven't got to it yet. So what about number 2? Well, the VA pays on a per day basis. So when you submit that certification, we're going to pay the full certification, but if any sort of change happens, we're going to calculate what that student would be earning on a per day basis. So that means that you have to figure out how many days are in the term, And you can do a simple calculation, divide that tuition and fees by the number of days in that term, and you'll get a per day amount. So what did the VA do? Well, we paid this random amount of $781.25 based on a per day prorated calculation. And then, so we're going to pay the student. Is this the new one? Yeah, okay, perfect. I made a typo and I got it corrected on time. So we're actually going to pay the student for housing, books, and supplies for all 13 credits because they actually showed up, but they dropped during the drop period. So we're going to pay for the full 13 credits of books and supplies, not just 7. And then housing will be established for the time that the student was in the full time. So for that first week, he was in 13 credits, and then he reduced to 7. So we're going to pay that full-time housing for the first 7 days that you reported, and then we're going to reduce that to the appropriate rate of pursuit after they drop to 7. So that's how that goes. Okay, well, you only charge the student $700 because they're only in 7 credits according to everything. Your records say you had a 100%, you dropped within the 100% refund. You really only need $700, but you got $781.25 from the VA. You got to return the overs to the student, just as if that student paid it out of their own pocket. That's just how it goes. Same for non-33. So we're going to pay full time for those first 7 days, and then we're 7 credits in non-33 world is half-time. So we would pay half-time after that period. So we're talking here, this scenario is during a drop period. We're not talking about non-punitive grades or anything like that. We're talking about a drop within the drop period, according to your school. Any questions about that? Awesome. Okay, next scenario is that chronic dropper. So they register for full-time courses for the past 2 terms, and they drop several courses both times. And you know, maybe your business office is getting mad at you, like, I'm getting all these money from the VA, but we don't know what to do with it because the student keeps dropping. Well, what can you do as a certifying official? You can actually wait to certify within the first 30 days of the beginning of that term. So that's not normal because your students want their money, right? But if you have a chronic dropper, that might be something that you would consider. So it's just easier for everybody. You do have the ability to wait up to 30 days without being considered late to submit a certification. So if you do wait and they drop within that drop period, what do you report? Well, you report what actually happened. They registered for a certain amount of credits, for certain tuition and fees, and then they reduce them. So the payment scenario is going to be just like the one we just talked about, because that original and the adjustment are going to be paid at the same time, right? So you might have that little bit of money that's going back to the student still, but that student's also not going to have a $600 overpayment on their VA record now. And so, like I said, it's going to be a similar scenario on a prorated amount if you do wait. Your school might not allow you to wait. That might not be your policy, or that might not be the arrangement that you have with your veteran students. So it just kind of depends. If that works for you, do it. You have within 30 days from the start of that term. So there are some effects that differ from during the drop period versus after the drop period. So the VA is going to pay for the days attended if that reduction or withdrawal even happens during that drop period. So we're going to pay for them to attend that time period. Once we're talking about after your school's defined drop period, drop add period, then we determine if we pay based on the grade that's assigned to them. Is it a punitive grade or is it a non-punitive grade? So if a student earns a punitive grade, we're going to pay through the last date of attendance. If that student earns a non-punitive grade, we're going to ask if there are any mitigating circumstances that surround that drop. And if there are, we'll pay through the end of the last date of attendance. But we're going to have to get mitigating circumstances. And if we don't get mitigating circumstances, evidence of that non-punitive grade is not paid for. We roll that back as if it never happened. We'll talk about that a little bit more tomorrow. I don't think I have that. I think I have that a little bit at the end of this presentation, and tomorrow we'll talk a bit more in depth about non-punitive grades. Moving on, next scenario, remedial courses. Any questions about chronic droppers waiting? Talk loud. Only if due process has passed and they have not set up a payment plan with the DMC. So, no. Just as the school goes through a debt collection process, so does the veteran. DMC will explain it very well tomorrow. Okay, so most schools, probably every school in this room, offers some sort of remedial or deficiency course, which is designed to help the students get their skills up to the regular post-secondary level. So these are elementary or secondary level education programs or courses, math, English, reading. When your student applies, they're going to take tests to find out at what level they're at. And so if that student has an established need to take these basic courses that are not, that 100 level course yet, then you can certify a remedial or deficiency course. We do have to have copies of those test results or any sort of document that justifies the need for that course. And that's page 49 of the SCO handbook. So, well, what if the student is not comfortable? Maybe they took algebra like 5 years ago and they're going to be an engineer. So they know that they're not proficient at the level of mathematics. Maybe their transfer credits say that they are, but they're just not comfortable. They want to take, a lower level course. Well, they can take it, but they're going to have to pay out of pocket for that. If you don't have justified test results or any sort of documentation that officially says that student needs to be taking that course, they have to pay for it out of pocket. But you can absolutely let them take it, but they have to pay for it. I mean, if it's just students saying, I would like to take this class, then no. I would tell them to take a placement test. I feel like that's the way to mitigate that. Oh, I feel like that would be an acceptable thing. Like if they've tried the higher level and they're not successful, then I feel like that would be justification. But if they are just saying, oh, well, I've not even tried that higher level yet, I just want to take it so I'm more comfortable or to get a refresher, that's not justification. Oh, the last question was, I'll repeat that because I think it was actually a really good real world thing. So the last question was, the student was in the regular college course, say, I don't know, English 101, and they're just not good at English. And the professor says, you need to go and take this remedial course. To me, that's justification because they have not been successful at the higher level. But if, again, they're just saying, I think in order to be successful at this level, I need to take the remedial, that's not justification.
So just for clarification, if a course is a prerequisite to another course, but it's not a remedial course, like human body is a prereq to general A&P, human body is not required for graduation, but general A&P is, that human body would be considered remedial, correct?
Oh, I don't think it's remedial. It would just
No.
be a prerequisite, and then that would be able to be certified because it is a prereq.
Under residence, the resident credit, yeah.
Yeah,
whatever,
under the
yeah,
regular
yeah,
credit,
yeah.
it would not be a remedial. You have specific courses that would be certified as remedial. They would be, generally speaking, they're below 100 level, so they're like 091 or whatever. You should have maybe just a couple specific courses that are actually remedial deficiency courses that you would know about. And only those very small set of courses can be certified as remedial deficiency. But if it's a prerequisite that is still that post-secondary level, that would just be regular. Yeah. All right. Good stuff. So any type of remedial or deficiency course cannot be certified if it's a distance course, because that's just not approvable. It has to be a resident course. If a student fails to meet the objective of the remedial course, they can continue to take it until they satisfy that. And if it becomes a non-punitive grade, those actually don't get, that's like the only time you don't report a non-punitive grade is if it's a remedial deficiency course. And then if the student passes the remedial course, but then fails that next level, they cannot repeat the remedial course for VA payment. They can pay for it out of pocket, but they've actually already demonstrated proficiency in that remedial course, so they can't repeat that course for VA purposes. Does that make sense? All right. So getting into the certifying, so this is what your VA once looks like. You have 3 fields for the types of credit hours. RES is resident, DIST is distance, and then here's your remedial deficiency. It's extremely important that you certify these courses appropriately for a couple of reasons. One, because we want to make sure that that was a legitimate, that student had legitimate reason to take that deficiency course. So we're going to look, if that student's chosen for compliance survey, we're going to look for those documents. Also, if they are a Chapter 35 student, that's very important information because that student probably isn't going to be charged entitlement for those credits. Chapter 35 students actually have 5 free months of entitlement that they can use for less than post-secondary level courses. So your high school diploma, they get 5 free months of entitlement. Well, what if they didn't use their 35 for high school? Well, then they can have those 5 free months of entitlement to use if they need remedial or deficiency courses. And then we actually treat those credits the same as if they were just a resident course because of, like I just mentioned, you cannot certify an online remedial or deficiency course. So we're going to combine in this example, we have 3, 3, and 3. So we're going to combine that remedial deficiency credit hours of 3 with the 3 resident course credits that you certified. So they're going to be in 6 total in resident course credits and 3 distance. All right, so moving on to the next, if anybody has questions about remedial deficiency. Moving on to the next scenario, F grades. Everybody's got them. Okay, so there's a lot of words up there about students and terminating and changes to their enrollment and violating policies. Well, what if they didn't actually violate any of those things and they just earned a bunch of F grades? What do you do? Okay. If a student completes a period of enrollment with a failing punitive grade or an F grade, does the school need to report the last date of attendance during that enrollment period? No, you don't. If they are not violating an attendance policy. So, which goes on to the next question, kind of rolls into that. Are schools required to report any changes in attendance or only those that violate the attendance policy? Only those that violate the attendance policy. Any school in here that actually has a measurable, enforceable attendance policy? Upper Iowa? is like a 14-day. They have to show up for the first week. First 2 classes. Okay. So only one school in this whole entire room has a measurable attendance policy. So I'll show you some examples. Well, that's the thing. It's your school's policy, not the course policy. Okay, so your student earns punitive F grades. The only thing that you would actually report is if they violate a policy, meaning standards of progress, maybe. But in this case, we're talking about a specific attendance. So we wouldn't be reporting that. This presentation should be online. This document is actually embedded in this presentation. You can click on this. This is the actual advisory from the VA. That is these questions. These are questions that I've gotten. This slide is actually questions that I've gotten outside of what the advisory answers and asks. So the SCO handbook on page 70 says, if a student completes the term with all F or non-punitive grades, then determine and report the actual last date of attendance for each course, and if required, terminate the student for unsatisfactory progress. So does that actually say that I have to report a last day of attendance if they earned all F grades? Well, yes, if you have an enforceable attendance policy. But if you don't, then the only thing you'd likely be reporting is unsatisfactory progress. Does that make sense to everyone? Okay, so what are the implications of this for a student? Well, they're going to be collecting benefits for F grades. I know that bends a lot of people. But we have to remember that they're also burning their entitlement. So when that student comes to retake that course, they may not have entitlement to be getting paid for that. They also have a risk of being suspended if they want to earn F grades. So, it's on the student. Sure, they might be receiving benefits for a term where they earned all F grades. There's not much that we can do about it. Just have to report what is required. Okay, so what is an enforceable attendance policy? This is an actual attendance policy from an actual school in Wisconsin. I'm not going to read it to you, but as you can see, it says faculty are required to keep accurate attendance records which are submitted to student records. So that means that every single person in the faculty has to take attendance, and it is part of their student record. And then they have other measurements. You have to attend the first week. So you've attended the first week, but then you stop attending. Well, if you stop attending for 14 days, then you can be withdrawn. That's a measurable and enforceable policy because the faculty, must keep the attendance, and it is part of the record. In this scenario, if you have an attendance policy that's somewhat near this, you would be reporting a last date of attendance for any type of change that they make. Okay, what about a policy that's not enforceable? Well, you're expected to show up, and if you don't, your grades may reflect that. That's pretty much what this says. There is nothing specific that says that your instructors must take attendance. There is nothing specific that states a period of time, and it is not part of their student record. This is not an enforceable attendance policy. So if your school has something that looks like this, which is everybody except Upper Iowa, you're not going to be reporting a last date of attendance for F grades. Got that? All right, perfect. Okay, so let's move on. What about a repeat class? Oh, hang on.
So we don't have an enforceable attendance policy, so I just report like unsat at the end of the semester. But if one of them is reported as an XF, do I report the walkaway F even though we don't have the established attendance policy? Because I have been doing that.
So what's an XF?
Like a stopped attending class. So they didn't actually complete the term.
Okay, so there's a couple ways to look at that. And the way that I look at that is, number one, what's your attendance policy? Okay, so you just told me you don't have an enforceable one. So then I would go and I would look at what that XF actually means. That's actually a grading policy, right? That's your grading system. That's not an attendance policy.
It's a grade earned by not attending classes anymore. Like
So, like, without actually like reading your policy, it would be difficult for me to give you
it's
a
like
really
an unofficial
good answer.
withdrawal almost.
Yeah, see, Milwaukee has the, F0 through 16 grade policy for financial aid purposes.
So that's
Okay.
kind of what, yeah.
That's still a punitive grade. That's a punitive F grade that they earn. Is that XF a punitive grade?
Yes.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, there you go. All right.
Okay, awesome. That was really good. Thank you, Miranda. Okay, so moving on to the repeat classes. Can we report them? Can we certify them? The student, they're not really great at doing biology, and they want to be a nurse. Well, that could be a problem. So your nursing program, maybe it requires a B, but they've not yet earned a B. They can keep taking that class, and that class can keep being certified until they get that B. There's no longer a limit on the number of times you may certify a course. There's also no longer a requirement to report if that first attempt or maybe the second attempt turns into a non-punitive grade. A lot of times your grading policies or your school policies will have that first attempt changed to a non-punitive grade. It used to be that if the sun was in the west and the wind was blowing from the east and it's a non-punitive grade on the first attempt, then you would have to report that non-punitive grade. That's not the case anymore. So courses that are successfully completed may not be certified. And if a student, maybe they get a D, but that could be acceptable. Then they just want to get a better grade, maybe to raise their GPA or to maybe look better. They can take it, but it's got to come out of their own pocket. If that course requirement has been satisfied, you got to move on.
Like we have, some program courses are all your program courses you're required to have at least a 2.0 GPA in all your core classes. So in that case, if it was a core class and they got a D, but they had to repeat it to graduate, and it's a written policy for all programs, it's all across the board. Would that be acceptable then? You'd be able to certify that?
So I think I heard you say that the grade has to be a 2.0 or better. So that means a C or better. So yeah, if they don't have a C, then they can take it again and be certified.
Double check on that.
Yeah.
I get that. That happens a lot where they get stuck where they have one class and then they want to come back and repeat it. So,
yeah, if it's a requirement of that program for that specific grade or that course to be graded at a certain level, yes, that can be certified. Jane?
You can still do that, right? Take any.
Well, yeah, but if it's a requirement, then it doesn't matter. If we're rounding, you're talking about rounding out?
Well, yeah, but if they want to get a better than a D,
that's a sticky sitch then. No, I don't think so.
Really?
No. If they want to round out to get more credits to get up to full time,
yeah,
that's different. They've already satisfied that course requirement, so they can't repeat that course for VA certifying purposes. They can take other courses and be certified, even if it's not a requirement of the degree to round out.
9 credits, and they want to be full time, and they want to retake the class they got the D in. They cannot.
I would have to say no, because they've technically they've satisfied that course requirement. They got to move on to a different course.
Okay.
Behind you, Jackie.
So if we have a student that has to get up to a 2.0 for their major or something like that, sometimes it's more achievable by repeating one class than maybe taking 3 to get there. So by retaking that one class that they maybe got a D in, could potentially complete their program with that one class if they retake it.
Sure, and basically, if that student has already satisfied the requirement of that specific course, okay? But they are choosing to retake that specific course to help their GPA, that's going to have to come out of their own pocket. Because we're paying for the progress, and according to us, that progress has already been satisfied.
I had a case where a guy was applying for, he was going to go to grad school, and he said that he had to repeat a class so that he could get into grad school because he had to have a certain grade for that class, but it wasn't a policy at my school. So I didn't certify it, but I wanted to know, should I have actually then? Because he's trying to get in, it's a course that would basically, wouldn't transfer, it would have probably for undergrad, but not, because it's kind of a weird situation.
If it's already satisfied, whether it was at your school or another school, and they want to take it again, they have to pay for it out of their own pocket. Same with transfer credits. Same with, if they're, if your school is accepting transfer credits from another school, so you're saying that that student is proficient enough in these courses to accept these transfer credits, the VA is going to take that, and if the student wants to take any of those courses over that you have accepted those credits, saying you are now proficient in those areas, if that student wants to take those courses again, even if you accept, because you accepted those credits, that would have to come out of their own pocket. Does that answer your question? Okay.
So we have a little bit of a unique situation.
Oh, look at you. Thank you. Okay, I was wrong. Okay, page 50 of the SEO handbook answers Jane's question beautifully about rounding out. Her scenario was the student successfully passed the course, right, according to their school technically, and the VA, maybe they just want to get a better grade. They're in their last semester. The SEO handbook says, in rounding out for a full-time schedule, VA students may use any credit hour unit subject, including a subject that has previously been successfully completed, received a passing grade. So thank you for that. That's very great. Kathy is always, Kathy keeps me straight. All right, Emily.
So we have a unique situation with, we have what we call a pre-program status for students. Students who haven't met the requirements, for example, chemistry for nursing. They're required to have chemistry to be admitted to the program. It's a prereq. But what they'll do is they'll admit them as a pre-program student. And so that's what they consider fully accepted. Can we certify the prereq
Yes.
as part of the program?
You can certify it, yes. And your school is saying that it's a prerequisite to basically be admitted to the program?
So for example, the student can take the chemistry, which is a prereq to be admitted, fully admitted. So they can take all their gen eds, they can take other classes required that are not like core nursing classes. So they can't take any of the higher level nursing classes until they've met that prereq.
Yeah, you can certify that.
Thank you.
Yes, yes. They should be in some way or shape admitted to your school, or at least be working through that process.
So what about the same scenario, except we don't accept them pre-program? That really would be a requirement to be accepted.
So you're saying that in order for your school to accept them as a matriculated student, they have to take these courses?
Chemistry, not the gen eds or anything else she mentioned.
I feel like that is I feel like that's certifiable. I feel like that's addressed in the SEO handbook. It's under prereqs, yeah. Yeah, there's a whole section about training required for the next level or non-matriculated students up to 2 terms. We'll talk about a little bit about that tomorrow. There are some weird situations that I've answered recently about prerequisites, and there are cases that they shouldn't be certified, but in most cases that it's okay. And really the only time it's not okay is if it's just that student like wanting to take courses that won't count towards anything. So yeah. All right, let's move on. What to do if a non-punitive grade is assigned? Okay, so the VA, we don't pay for non-punitive grades, generally speaking. So if a student is assigned a non-punitive grade, you should reduce or terminate that certification with one of the reasons that states non-punitive grades assigned. There's more than one. So in this case, this is the reduction reasons. So your termination reasons look a little bit different, but these are reduction reasons. So one of them is reduction after drop period, non-punitive grades assigned, and the other is student completed term, but non-punitive grades assigned for one or more courses. So those are your 2 areas. I guess I ran out of time. Those are your 2 areas, choices for reduction. I'll go through this real quick. So since non-punitive grades don't count towards academic progress, that is why we're not going to pay for these types of grades. When a non-punitive grade is reported, we are going to develop for mitigating circumstances. You can provide them as an SCO, and if you don't provide them as an SCO, the VA will actually develop to the claimant upon processing that change of certification, which is a 1999B. And the VA no longer assumes mitigating circumstances for Chapter 33 students. What are mitigating circumstances? They are circumstances beyond the student's control that prevent that student from continuing in school or cause that student to reduce credits. November 2015 is when that changed for Chapter 33 students, is when we stopped assuming mitigating circumstances were present. That was a system thing that we did. So now we are treating them as the same as any benefit across the board. So acceptable mitigating circumstances must be provided in order to pay benefits for the period of attendance prior to the drop date. If they are not provided or accepted, any benefits paid from the beginning of the term will be considered an overpayment and a debt will be established. Real quick, these are some examples of mitigating circumstances that you can actually choose from in VA once. If you have evidence of those mitigating circumstances, you can act as an agent for that student and provide that to the VA right there on the certification. But don't just do it because the student tells you. Like, get a piece of evidence. And if you don't have that piece of evidence, have the student do it with the VA. You have to have that piece of evidence and retain that piece of evidence of the mitigating circumstances in that student's file. Only then may you choose one of those. Last but not least is 6-hour credit exclusion. Sorry. This may be the random forgiveness thing that the SCO hotline was talking about. We do have a 6-hour credit exclusion that allows the VA to pay for up to 6 credits through their last date of attendance without even asking for mitigating circumstances. So if your student drops after the drop period and non-punitive grades are earned, we will, for the very first time, if this is the first time that this situation has occurred, we will grant up to 6 credits for that time that they attended. If the student is in less than 6 credits, they don't get to carry over those other credits to use it next time. No, we're just taking that one time up to 6 credits at that one time. Say they're enrolled in more than 6 credits, we're going to pay for 6 credits through their last date of attendance and ask for mitigating circumstances for all the remaining credits. And then we'll either pay or not pay. So those are very quickly mitigating circumstances and 6CE. These are the scenarios that we covered. I think we touched on a couple other really good examples. Sorry, I was wrong about that. Thank you for bringing that up. Anything outside of that? Running out of time.
When you do the multiple terms, especially for grad, it'll ask for the TTFT, so I'm doing 2 separate lines. They're in 6 credits, which is considered 3/4 time, but I don't know whether to put 3/4 time each line or am I doing half-half? That's the only thing I get.
We'll talk about that a little tomorrow in the more basic course. Excuse me. You're actually supposed to enter that training time for that term that you're certifying. For the so like the dates that you're certifying, like, so if they're in a non-standard term, and your school is going to consider them full-time during that term, then you would put full-time. We'll talk about that a little bit more tomorrow too. Anything else? Study abroad? That wasn't on the docket, but we can maybe fit it in. Okay.
When a student drops in the middle of the term, and let's say they drop 6 credits, does the VA ask for book stipend money back, as well as housing and tuition?
So the VA, if it is a non-punitive grade, in order for us to make that payment, yes, we will ask for mitigating circumstances. If they are not provided, then we'll ask for that money back. If the student attended and earned a punitive grade, even in the middle of the term, then we won't ask for that money back. The books, yeah, all the money. We want all the monies. Tuition, books, we literally act like it never happened. So books too. Yep. Thank you.